These two tiny islands in the middle of the sea are only a few miles apart, and yet they couldn't be more different. One, they're in two completely different countries. Secondly, they're in different time zones. And third of all, they're almost on completely different days to each other. So let's talk about the Diomede Islands in the Bering Straits between Alaska and Russia. First, let's place ourselves on a map. This is the state of Alaska in the USA, this is the easternmost side of Russia, the Chukotka region, and between the two of them are the Bering Straits. A tiny sliver of water between the USA and Russia. They're only a few tens of miles apart, and right in the middle of them are these two small islands, and these are the Diomede Islands. So in awards for most creative names, the biggest island is called Big Diomede and the smallest island is called Little Diomede. Little Diomede owned by the United States. There is a permanent population actually on this island despite the fact it's only 2 miles across. There is less than 100 people, I think about 80 people that live on this island. There is no permanent population on Big Diomede owned by Russia, but there has been military presence there over the years. This right here is the bustling metropolis of the city of Diomede. Yes, that's actually what it's called. This is the town on Little Diomede owned by the USA. And actually the majority of the population here are indigenous. So this is Alaskan Inuits, or more locally, this is the Inupiat people who live in this region. And like I said, this town is tiny. Only about 80 people live here, a few houses either side of this photo. The majority of the wildlife here is actually bird life. In stark contrast to Little Diomede, Big Diomede, owned by Russia, is completely different. You can see just how flat that top is, and yet the only infrastructure on this island is literally that tiny amount there, just a few houses, which is a military presence. There used to be an indigenous population here, but they were moved off the island to make room for the military operation there, considering during the times of the USSR, this island was literally just a few miles from the USA. But because of where they're situated on the planet, the international date line literally runs through the middle of these two islands. So not only are they only a few miles apart, but they're in completely different time zones. And because this is the most western point of the global hemisphere, and this is the most eastern point of the global hemisphere, these two islands are actually 20 or 21 hours apart in terms of their time zones. So it could literally be two entirely different days, almost by 24 hours on both of these. So if you had two populations here interacting, I think it would be very confusing. So maybe it's for the best that there's actually only one permanent population on this one. So there you have it. These are the Diomede Islands, two islands just a few miles apart and yet in completely different worlds from each other, two different countries, two different time zones and almost an entire day apart. So if you lived on this island, you probably could say in the words of Tina Fey, Sarah Palin, I can see Russia from my house.